Everybody knows that Google is the largest search engine. But when it comes to local search, if I asked you what the second largest search engine was, would you know the right answer? Most businesses would probably say Yelp, Bing, or maybe even ChatGPT. But the answer might surprise you. It's AppleMaps. AppleMaps has been quietly building its presence for a long time. Apple has a 60% market share in North America. So literally 60% of people walking around with a phone in their pocket have iPhones. And when you buy that iPhone, the default mapping application is AppleMaps. If you're on an iPhone, by the way, and you search for AppleMaps, it's not going to say Apple Maps. It's just going to be called Maps. That's the name of their application. Apple has been quietly building their presence in local for a long time. They launched AppleMaps in 2012, and it was a quite notable tech failure actually at the time. It had bad data. It was sending people in the wrong direction. It was like literally, it's a textbook case of one of the worst tech launches in history, basically. But Apple hasn't given up. They continue to invest in Apple Maps. They continue to build, back-end solutions. And finally, about 2 years ago, they launched AppleBusinessConnect, which gave businesses access to their business profile in a very similar way that businesses can access their Google business profile. In fact, it's very, very similar. It's almost like Apple in some ways just copied Google. There are some subtle and some very unique differences, though. There are some things that Apple is doing way better than Google. And that's going to be a whole separate video where I compare Apple business features versus Google business features for business profiles. But Apple is truly the number 2 local search platform. You can't argue with data. When we compare business visibility in terms of views, in terms of actions like direction requests, phone calls, website visits, to platforms like Yelp, for example, what we're finding is that even in really strong markets that Yelp has had presence in for far longer, we're talking like New York, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Miami, Chicago, when we compare the volume of business traffic on Yelp versus Apple is on average getting 25 times more visibility for businesses than Yelp profiles for the same business. And so that is really compelling, right? If we think about, where to invest our money in local marketing, Google is the obvious choice. Everybody has an understanding of Google's presence and its dominance in local search, but Apple is often very rarely talked about, which surprises me because Apple is actually quite relevant. We've even found some businesses getting more direction requests on Apple than on Google, which completely blows my mind. I've been doing maps marketing and local marketing for over 15 years. And for the first time in history, I've actually found a channel that can have, in some cases, more potential impact than Google. You don't find that all the time. Now, I'm not saying that if you went to Apple that you're going to have the same thing. And these are outlier examples that I'm sharing with you. But on average, we're finding that most businesses are getting about half the volume of directions on Apple versus Google, which again, if you think about it, the next closest competitor, is way far off. Yelp is maybe a 10th the size of Google. So the fact that Apple is about half the size of Google when it comes to navigation requests is really powerful. And that is an important point, though, that when we look at the intent of, what are users doing on these apps, on Google, generally speaking, about 70 to 80% of searches are discovery. They're searching for restaurants, they're searching for dentists, they're searching for tire shops, they're searching for the things that they need immediately in their local area. On Apple, it's kind of the opposite. On Apple, we're finding that about 70 to 80% of search intent is business name or brand driven, whereas on Google, that's about 20 to 30% on average. So it does suggest that Apple is still maybe leans a little bit more towards being a navigation app still, but it's still quite important to think about that. If it's the last click that people make before they come to your business, that experience does matter, right? Even if you've already converted them and they're already coming to you, that last mile, you need to make sure that your PIN is correct, that your hours are right, that you do have your brand well represented on this channel, even if it was just a navigation tool. But that other 20 or 30% of your audience on Apple are there for the same reason that they're on Google. They're looking to make their decision. We just did a video about this where we were at the International Pizza Expo and asked people to find a local business for us, specifically find a local pizza shop. And several of the respondents in this experiment went right to Apple Maps. They didn't go to Google. They didn't go to Yelp. They went to Apple. And that's so important to think about, that it is actually a growing marketing channel. It's a marketing asset to your business. And so next time that somebody asks you, what can we do to diversify our business? Where else can we generate presence? Where else can we find easy wins? The answer is Apple Maps, not Yelp, not Bing, not ChatGPT. Not that those things aren't something to pay attention attention to, of course, but most businesses are completely overlooking that Apple is squarely the number 2 local search platform out there. So look, it might sound like a consolation prize to call Apple the number 2 local search platform, but that's a big deal. Apple had a rocky start. A lot of people weren't using it, but over the years, they've improved. And the most important thing they did is they allowed businesses to finally take control of their presence. And that's really what AppleMaps is helping people to do, is to really understand how these things impact their business, what they can do to improve their presence. And even if nothing more than being a navigation tool for your business, AppleMaps, could be an important part of your branding, making sure your photos are there, your logos are there, that you have showcases listed, that you have all the right information, that your pin is in the right place. I'd be shocked if in most boardrooms today that anybody's even thinking about AppleMaps as a marketing channel, but it is. It's absolutely a growing opportunity for businesses who are paying attention and who take the time and the energy and the effort to actually invest in this. If you're a business who's spending money on Yelp and you're not even considering or thinking about what you could do on Apple, you're missing a massive opportunity. Like I said, in our research, Apple is 25 times the size of Yelp on average. There are cases where it's 50 times the size of it. There's also cases where it's only 10 times bigger. But no matter which way you spin it or look at it, Apple is, no question about it, the number 2 local search platform. And that's a really, really big accomplishment for Apple. It's why we now have integrations with AppleBusinessConnect at MapLabs, because it is that important. And what we're finding is that businesses who actually take control and take charge of their presence on Apple are actually reaching even more people than they were before. And that's really important too. And so if you're looking to get better insights and analytics, and more importantly, strategies to help your business stand out from the competition in local search, check out maplabs.com. We offer totally free analysis. We also have a free trial of our software where we help businesses gain a deeper understanding of their real-world performance on maps and provide them recommendations and strategies to get the maximum results possible.